So, welcome everyone to the second episode of Coffee with Christiansen. Now, you guys are in for such a treat today because joining me is my mentor and Olympic silver medalist in diving, Leon Taylor. Welcome, Leon.
Hi, so thanks for having me. This is interesting. Me being in the hot seat and you interviewing me. Our relationship over the years as I felt that I've been putting you in the hot seat. So I'm looking forward to today. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. So most of my followers are more dressage fans than diving. So could you just give us a short introduction into who you are?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. So my name's Leon. I'm Olympic silver medalist in diving in 2004 in the Athens Olympic Games. I stood next to Peter Waterfield, and the event that I competed in, that I won the medal in at those Olympic Games, was the men's 10-meter synchronized platform. And that was actually British diving's first Olympic medal for 44 years. That was my third Olympic Games. I tried to hang on for another Olympic Games, but in 2008, my body finally had enough of what I was asking it to do. Diving's a pretty punishing sport. And after 4 reconstructive shoulder surgeries and a really bad lower back, the medical team told me it was time for me to step aside and hand on the baton. And of course, I've still been involved in the sport since retiring. And maybe your viewers will recognize me for my role in the BBC. So I'm the commentator and pundit for BBC Sport when it comes to diving. And yeah, I would have been in Tokyo this summer, but as many people have been affected by the current pandemic, which we're all navigating through, that's been delayed by a year. So I have to wait as well.
Yeah, obviously a lot of athletes have suffered for the past few months, and you've been really kind in offering your advice to me with how that affects me mentally. But going back to your first Olympic Games, I read that you were also studying for your A-levels at the time, and we all know young athletes have to juggle elite sport and studying. I just wondered if you had a bit of advice for maybe some of the young viewers out there wanting to do the same.
Yeah, certainly. So I found I found school very challenging, especially when I was younger. As you know, Sophie, I was hyperactive, and so my parents had no idea what to do with me, and they found that if I could move physically, I would eventually get tired and then fall asleep. So my life of sport started way before I can remember, and I did multiple different sports. In fact, when I was young, I competed at a national level in 3 different sports. So at the age of 11, I was competing nationally in swimming, gymnastics, and diving. And through those teenage years, I started to be able to focus a little bit more on my schoolwork, and got through my GCSEs and my A-levels. Actually, I was really focused by then. I understood the importance of education and schoolwork, and the challenge I faced in Olympic year. This is way back in 1996. So the Olympic Games were being held in Atlanta, in the USA, and my A-levels were that year as well. So I had to combine the two, and the only way I was able to approach that was to prepare early for both, and of course there were pinch points. For example, my study leave, when all of my fellow students would have been studying for their A-levels, I was traveling to 2 different countries, and then the Olympic trials were in Edinburgh. So I was in the USA for a week, then I was in Mexico the next week, both Olympic qualifiers. I came back to the UK for 4 days, then I went up to Edinburgh to compete in the Olympic trials. I came back for 1 day and sat my first A-level. So I knew that was coming. And what I needed to do was make sure that I was as best prepared as I could be for both of those. And of course, I can't dive from the 10-meter diving board while reading my A-level economics book. So what I needed to do was front-loaded it. So I remember all of my fellow classmates weren't really studying very hard for their mock exams, but I prepared really precisely and really got everything down for my mocks, because I wanted to study, make use of that time I had where I wasn't traveling to compete, and get up to date, to get the syllabus to that point really nailed, so that final term, when I was traveling a lot, when I was competing, when I was attempting to qualify and subsequently qualifying for the Olympic Games, I was able to balance that, and I wasn't putting too much pressure on myself. Because you know this, Sophie, as soon as you try and do too many things at once, you fill up the stress bucket, if you will, and it overflows. So I had to be, when I was on the diving board, I was focusing on the diving that I was doing. And then as soon as I finished diving, I would open up and I would 100% be a student. I wouldn't let my mind run elsewhere. And it was that ability to compartmentalize that I really needed to implement. And it all came down to time management, which we know is an essential skill for anyone, particularly athletes, and planning in advance, because you know what's coming. So rather than sticking my head in the sand and hoping I would be okay, I was very proactive about it.
Yeah, and actually, for me, I found that studying and doing a sport to a high level meant that I could do both really well. I could come back to training fresh when I got bored of studying, and go back to studying when my sport was getting a bit too stressful. So having that balance, I think, is really useful for anyone. You don't have to be an elite athlete to have that balance. Um,
I agree, Sophie, and I think it's really important that whatever you're doing, you haven't got all of your eggs in one basket. I made the mistake after my successful combination of A-levels and Olympic Games in the same year. I thought that was too much for me, because it was really challenging to do both, to excel at both. You know, I passed all my A-levels, I got good grades, I got enough to go to university. I had a choice to go to university in America or here in the UK. I also went to the Olympic Games. I was the youngest member of the team. It was incredible. And I thought after that, I would give myself a break for a little bit of time. I chose not to go to university because I was deciding whether I was going to go to the States or not. So I did the exams, and that period of time where I was just diving, I thought that my diving would, because I had more time and attention, would really improve. But do you know what, Sophie? The opposite happened, because I didn't have that balance. When I got injured and all I was doing was diving, my whole world felt like it was crashing down because I didn't have anything else to pay attention to. And that was a key learning for me, having gone through the challenge of combining the two and then just doing the sport and feeling, you know, the vulnerability of being unbalanced completely, and then bringing back in other things in order to, as you've just brilliantly described, being able to divert your attention when one gets a little bit overwhelming, or when you get injured or ill or anything like that. You've got something else to put your energy into and focus on. And when I'm working with athletes or anyone, as you've rightly highlighted, it's so important that we check in. You know, have we got a balanced scorecard? Are there different things, you know, on that scorecard to keep us grounded and balanced?
yeah, cool. So one of your highlights also was that you invented the world's hardest dive at the time. Um, Obviously, breaking barriers is a big thing in order to get to the top, but obviously not every diver creates the hardest dive in the world. So tell me a bit about how, why you decided to do that. Was it organic with your training? Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, Sophie, because do you know what? The honest answer is it was out of frustration. And, you know, that's not a great emotion to act out of, but it is a very powerful one. What was happening early in my career is that diving as you know, a subjective sport where the judges decide what your performance is worth. And unfortunately, better now, but back then, the countries that had the best reputations the divers would get better marks from the judges. And to tell you what, when I'd stand there on the poolside at international competitions, I would be filled with frustration, rage when I'd look at the scores that we would get as divers from Great Britain compared to other athletes whose dives weren't as good and they were getting more favourable marks. And it was just so annoying. A bit like Eurovision Song Contest or X Factor. The judges, Sophie, we don't need to talk about the judges, but what was really interesting at that time is that I was getting annoyed, and it's something outside of my control, right, which we talk about a lot. But what happened at that time with all that frustration, there was a change in the rules, and this is what created the opportunity. The change in the rules was very simple. Before, in diving, there was a sheet of paper, and it was called the tariff list. You had every single dive that you were permitted to perform and its degree of difficulty next to it. So the harder the dive, the higher the degree of difficulty. And the governing body of world diving, FINA, said that all of those dives are valid, and to create a little bit more excitement, we've put together a formula which allows you to make up new dives. So you would be able to create whatever dive, a bit like a computer game. Now, when this opportunity came along, Sophie, I thought that it would be a bit of an arms race and there would be lots of divers from all over the world trying new things. But do you know what happened? Everyone stayed in the box, right? Everyone stuck to what they knew. What I did, I thought, well, if I can do something that gets the judges' attention, if I can do a dive that not even the Chinese or the Russians or the Americans would even contemplate doing, then maybe I can change the perception of the judges. And that was where the inspiration came from. And then, of course, the process was in place of creating the world's most difficult dive. I worked with my coach in diving. We use trampolines. We use overhead harnesses on the trampolines to try and get the aerial awareness that you neural pathways fired in order to figure out what it might feel like. You then use the different heights of diving boards to break down the dive into its component parts. And then finally, you go up and stand backwards on the edge of a 10-meter diving board. And at that moment in time, I'm stood there about to do the impossible. And yeah, that's quite a moment. And of course, once you've done the dive, I created the world's most difficult dive. It carried the highest degree of difficulty for the subsequent 11 years. But it was so difficult that it didn't give me any short-term successes. To be honest, over the next few years, that dive probably cost me podium places, but it did change the perception of the judges. And then, as the story goes, when Peter and I used that dive together in Athens, that was our final dive, and that was the dive that was sealed the deal when we stood on the podium together to celebrate that 20-year dream and journey.
So yeah, that is amazing. But I met you through mentoring. Obviously, you got to a stage where you wanted to give something back to the sport, just like I want to at the moment. So how did you get into mentoring? And what made you think, yeah, I'm quite good at this?
Well, I don't think anything made me think I was quite good at it, because like any skill in the early days, you make a lot of mistakes and you don't know what you're doing. And yeah, I think it was the same in any endeavor that I've been brave enough to take on. But how it happened, Sophie, when I came back from Athens, Peter and I were having a conversation on the way back, and we were celebrating our success, the adventure that we'd been on, but we also both felt a sense of responsibility, the responsibility that we now had as Olympic medalists to inspire, particularly in a sport and minority sport like diving. And that was the time where we were traveling the country either together or separately, different diving clubs, sharing our Olympic medal, telling our stories of how much it took and what we learned along the way. And that's when I met a lot of young athletes, but one in particular, a name that you'll recognize, was Tom Daly. And at the time, Tom was 10. I was his hero. And recently we did an Instagram live, actually, and we discussed, those times when I was 26, he was 10. And I used to call him every week. I watched him in the pool, and I'd actually spent some time chatting to him. I was so impressed with the questions he asked, and also the raw potential that I saw in his diving at that young age. And that's when I became Tom's mentor, and I had no idea what a mentor was meant to do, but I did my best, and it was great.
Hero as well, I read.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I had, the opportunity to impart everything that I'd learned. And that's how I went about it, Sophie. It was like, well, I wonder how good someone could be if I could share everything that I've learned, but not just in their diving pool, but it was, school, how to deal with coaches, how to deal with mum and dad, how to talk to the media, all these things that I'd experienced. If I could, impart in a way, it could assist. And yeah, we reflect very positively on that time, and I think it's so important that people like yourself, Sophie, who have so much to offer, so much to give, do take on the role of a mentor. And that's been my adventure, and that's why I'm so passionate about mentoring, because of course when we met, you heard my story, and then you asked me, you said, hey, there's a few things going on for me. It was 2012 Olympic year. The pressure was on you, the spotlight was on you. You asked me if I could mentor you, and it sounds a bit funny, a diver mentoring horsewoman, but it's and I know nothing about horses, not very little about cerebral palsy, and hardly anything, but I do know, and I do have a wealth of experience over certain areas of challenges, faces, and how we work together and continue to work together is joyful for me as a mentor. And well, I won't steal what you think of it, Soph, but it's I guess not to be restricted by having to know specific knowledge. It's having those experiences or skill sets that you can share in a way to guide someone in a way so they can figure it out for themselves. I think that's the easiest way to describe it.
Yeah, and when we met, I was really in such a dark place, So in 2011, my top horse had to be put down. Luckily, I bought my horse Rio in June of 2011, but he had to really step up, and that feeling of having like a year to get Rio ready for London really got to me. And I met you just after one of our selection trials where I came sixth, and the top 5 were going to be selected for London, and I was fortunate that it wasn't the final selection trials, but I'm sure you all will agree, listening to Leon talk, I was like, I need help. But I think that's really part of what makes a good athlete, being self-aware. It's all right to ask for help and know that, bring in other people from other sports who can help you. And yeah, listening to you speak, I was like, you can help me. So when I asked you, I did wonder what you thought about being my mentor. I was like, you probably think what? Like, and also at the time, I had already won 2 gold medals, but I think it's so difficult to keep at the top. That's when I need new ideas, fresh ideas that I thought you could bring in.
Absolutely. I remember it well, actually, Sophie, because I was taken back with, it's very flattering to be asked by anyone to go mentor, and for you to come over and ask me. The question I asked you straight away was, well, I said, thank you, first of all, for thinking that, you know, that I could play that role. And then I was like, well, you know, how specifically can I help you was the thing. What are the areas you think I can help you with? And what was great is that you were very clear on those areas. You were like, this is what's happening for me. This is how I'm feeling. When you told your story and said this, that's exactly what I'm feeling. If you can help me, guide me with these feelings of disillusionment, I'm not enjoying it, that's where you can help me. And so for me, it was a really easy answer. As soon as you explained to me the areas that you thought I could help with, I knew immediately I could definitely help you in those areas. And, you know, it was a good few months, wasn't it, leading up to a very successful London Games. And as all of your fans and audience will know, incredibly successful one, and a big turnaround from when we met at the Royal Holloway in April. Hey,
definitely. And you know, I remember you coming out to watch me ride, and you asked me one simple question afterwards was, are you having fun? And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that. No, I'm not. I'm so desperate to go to London that feeling is transferring through my horse. And you know, people might think diving and dressage are totally different sports, but actually, when you stop and think about it, they're quite similar. They're both subjective. They're both based on judging, and when you try too hard, it all goes to pot.
absolutely.
And you know, after I met you, I had this smile on my face for the rest of my competitions that year, and my results rocketed, and I got a PB in London, thanks to you. I kind of, you know, you never know what could happen, but I honestly do wonder if I hadn't have met you, would I have even gone to the games? You know, I obviously had the talent, but it has to be what's in your mind as well. Having the right mindset to compete at that level.
Absolutely. And, you know, we talk about it all the time, don't we, as athletes? There's the team behind the team. When you're an individual competitor, I compete individually in the synchro, obviously you're individual, but you do have your horse, but there are always other people who are inputting. So coaches, physios, even those people close to you, whether that's mentors, psychologists, etc. So it's important to make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people in the team. And that's what, as a mature athlete, an athlete who's been through several Paralympic cycles, you know, that's what I admire a lot of things about you, Sophie. But that's one thing that I admire is your ability to, you know, to communicate with people and bring the right team in, and knowing where your blind spots are, knowing when, because, you know, you can tell your audience, you know, I don't let you get away with anything. My style of mentoring, you know, you can't be a princess with me, can you? And I think it's really important.
Sit and talk to you, and I like feel through the phone that you're rolling your eyes, like, what are you on about now? But I think, you know, that mentor-mentee relationship, like, it has to work, you know, the mentee has to kind of know what you'll bring to the table, and kind of have mutual respect, and that element of being self-aware of, right, what do I need help with? And that, yeah, I think that's one of the key skills to being a top athlete, is knowing where you can improve. But I really like your way of mentoring as well. You kind of listen to the problem that I'm having, and then tell a story from your world that's similar without telling me what to do, just making me sit back and think about alternative ways around it. And I think that worked really well.
Well, thank you. I mean, and you asked me early on, you said, oh, how did you know you were good at mentoring? Well, that's one thing that I've learned over my experience as well of those people that I looked up to as mentors. Like when I was told what to do by someone, I would always be antagonistic and not do it, especially if it was my parents or whatever. So you've got to find another way of imparting knowledge and guiding someone. And so thank you for sharing that and for that feedback, because that's I've worked hard on that set of skills in order to bring out the best in people. And I think that the way that you respond and many people respond to it is very, very positive and allows you to be the most resourceful athlete, or if you're not an athlete, the most resourceful person in the particular role that you're being mentored in.
Yeah, and it's up to the mentee to really listen and take on board the advice. I'm sure you've met maybe young athletes who, you talk to and think, actually, I'm not sure they're quite ready for my help yet. So it's a really interesting space, mentoring.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be gained, isn't there? And I'm a big fan, and I think that there's opportunities out there for everyone to find multiple mentors, to engage in those conversations, and to share what you've learned, in the areas that you've been operating in, whether it's for a short time or a long time.
So we both know that, skills we learn as an elite athlete can be transferred over to business. Um, uh, and I think also a lot can be gained from mentoring. So what advice would you give the corporate world about their mentoring schemes?
Yeah, well, I've been very fortunate to be working in that space corporately, actually, for a number of years. And I think I don't know whether it's advice, but there's a massive opportunity for everyone to learn, and there's a lot in it for the mentor. So sometimes what I find when I'm engaging with a corporate, they think that, well, the people who are the best mentors are the ones who've got the most experience, but they're often the ones who are most busy, so they don't have the time or the capacity or often the inclination to spend time doing something else, because their to-do list or their list of commitments is too great. But actually there's a lot to be gained as a mentor. And so my opportunity, if you like, is to highlight that. So when I've been into organizations, whether they're thinking about setting up a mentee mentor scheme or a rollout within a corporate, it's about highlighting the opportunity for this two-way relationship, because as a mentor you learn from the mentee as well, even though it's the other way, and it can be massively rewarding. In fact, it's one of the most rewarding relationships that one can have, is a mentee mentor relationship. And it's being less kind of, it's about finding the person that you want to work with. And I often talk about a bit of speed dating, because you know very quickly whether you've got the chemistry to work with someone, and it can be a really, really highly effective informal relationship. So I often try and encourage mentors to not be sitting opposite a desk in a corporate environment. Go out for a walk, go for your coffee in the days when we weren't socially distancing, so it'll be over Zoom or a chat now. But I think it's a really lovely way, because when people are relaxed and smiling, you can start to really get into it. This formal way often doesn't work for people, and I think with corporates it can be misunderstood what's actually needed, how it's done, and I think there's different approaches. But there's massive benefits for the mentor as well as the mentee, and it's this kind of fluid thing, and when it works well, it has a massive impact on the wellness of the organization, because people feel more connected, they feel more supported, they feel more nurtured. There's a few studies shown that those organizations who are offering mentoring programs, the retention rate was higher for employees. So there's benefits business wide as well.
Amazing. So you are currently doing some movement and mindset sessions on Zoom to help people get through this challenging time. I thoroughly recommend them. Leon just makes you always feel happier after you talk to us. And that's what we all need at this time. So yeah, I guess you're enjoying like adapting to this time. With your Zoom meetings, how are you finding them?
Yeah, so it was well, to be honest, Sophie, when the outbreak kind of took hold, Ali and I, my partner of 10 years, we were in Lanzarote and on holiday, and everything started to escalate very quickly. And I was looking at my emails every day and watching every single event that I was booked to speak at, to present at, was cancelled, postponed. And then when the Olympic Games, Paralympic Games were moved, I actually fell into a tailspin, and I really didn't know what to do, because for the first time ever, I didn't have anything to hang my hat on, and I'd lost all of my sources of income. And I'm not, first of all, I was really angry because I thought it was an overreaction to the situation. And then I started thinking, well, it'll only last 2 weeks, it'll be fine. And then I actually fell into a state of sadness, which lasted quite a few days. I really didn't know what to do. My mental health was suffering. I had severe, anxiety. I couldn't really sleep. And then I finally kind of turned the corner through to acceptance of the situation, that I couldn't control what was happening. And there was a quote which I'll share with you, and it's the one that kind of just gave me that little tip forwards. And it was, what has happened is uncontrollable. What you do now changes everything. So that's when I was like, okay, so I'm not a key worker. I'm not able to help on the front lines. What can I do? Well, I've got two passions: mindset coaching and movement. So I need to share those with people. I need to give myself a sense of purpose. And that's when I created my offering. It's a workout for your mind and your body. And I'm throwing everything at it, all of my years of studying, of psychology, of my research into mental health, but also movements, and my 10 years as a yoga teacher. So I've designed this 60-minute class. I'm running 3 times a week publicly, and I understand that people out there are feeling terrible as well and have been financially impacted. So I'm doing a pay what you can format. So those people who are really suffering are just paying a small donation, and those people who have never been busier than ever because of the industry that they work in, they're paying a little bit more. And I'm getting groups of people together, we're moving together, we're having fun, and it's given me a real sense of purpose and contribution to what's going on to people's wellness. And it's a lot of fun. So if anyone who's watching this and listening to Sophie and I, come along. It's easy to find on my channel. Sophie may even share the link wherever you're watching this video. So check it out and come and join me.
And yeah, actually, a lot of, I know disabled people are a bit hesitant of getting involved in things like that, because they are, well, am I able to do that? I'm a bit like that because I've only got one working arm currently, well, partly working. So, are your sessions, inclusive?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is at the beginning, so what I tend to do is there's different component parts. There's the mindset tool, which is, a precise tool, changes each week, and whether it's a breathing technique or whether it's something else that everyone can use. When it comes to the movement, what I'm inviting people to do is do what they can. The way that I structure the movement is different exercises for a certain amount of time. So we kind of warm up together. So the responsibility is for the person who turns up. So the split is about 35 minutes movement, 25 minutes of other stuff. There's a 10-minute relaxation at the end, where I use my skills as a teacher and you know, all of the things that I've got for guided relaxation. So I work for Headspace, so I'm using like very meditative techniques and such like. And so I don't want to say, oh, you need to be this. So I had someone in my class who was in their 60s, and I had a fellow Olympian in there the other week, and they were both able to work together. So I don't want to say you can or you can't come, but it's the responsibility of the person who's coming along to find what they can do. So some people are injured, so they're missing things, but it's always the option to come and be part of it. And I think the most important thing is the connection. So it's definitely not 60 minutes of exercise. There's this component part for the mind, for the breath, and for the body. And there's also the movement part. And whatever your body allows you to do, you join in with it. And it's just about being connected for that time. And that's how I've tried to build it, is make it open to everyone. And of course, it's not going to be for everyone, but you don't know until you try.
Definitely. I think we'll leave it at that, because that is probably what you thought when I asked you to be my mentor. Thank you so much, Leon. I hope you guys have enjoyed that as much as I have. See you next time.